prepping does not have to mean preparing a whole week's worth of meals in little individual meal containers. I find what often works best for me is preparing a bunch of different ingredients that I can then incorporate into balanced meals and snacks throughout the week. Hi, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Christine, and I'm going to share with you some simple, healthy meal prep for spring. I'll cover 12 different plant-based ingredients that you can prep ahead to save time during the week. I'll also share with you some recipes for snacks and meals that you can make with these ingredients. To make it easy for you, I'm going to provide you with a link below with a downloadable and printable meal prep guide. I'll tell you how to get that at the end of this video. So let's go ahead and get started on our spring meal prep. So the ingredients I'm going to show you how to meal prep today are all mostly vegetables, and I'm also showing one fruit. And this is to keep it really friendly for different types of diets, whether you're eating paleo or vegan, or you just consider yourself plant-based but not totally vegan, or even if you're eating autoimmune protocol, which is also shortened AIP. These are all anti-inflammatory ingredients that everybody can eat. That's one thing we agree on, is having lots of healthy vegetables in our diet. First, we're going to want to wash all of our produce, and to do that, to prep everything, you'll want to have a vegetable peeler, a good sharp small knife like a paring knife. A salad spinner comes in really handy, a large bowl to fill with cold water, and I also use a little scrub brush like this to really scrub my carrots. So fill a bowl with cold water, and then one by one we're just going to take each vegetable and soak it in there for a little bit, and then take our vegetable scrub brush and just give it a good scrub after it's soaked in there for a bit. I'm rushing the process along a little bit just for demonstration purposes, so you get the idea. You loosen the dirt first by soaking it, then give it a good scrub, and then we'll rinse it off under running water. Then as needed, you can use your vegetable peeler just to get off any little marks there that didn't come off with scrubbing. Or if needed, you can even use your knife, especially on the ends of vegetables like this, to trim off any dark spots. And then you're just going to repeat this process basically for all of your different vegetables. With your carrots, you can do the same thing. Give them a good soak and wash and rinse them off. And you can just either really scrub the surface of the skin well, and if you're happy with that, leave it at that, or you can peel them if you want. Especially I find if my carrots are a little bit older, they benefit from having a light peeling, because then that does help to make them a little sweeter and less bitter. And with the carrots, you're going to want to trim off the tops and bottom. I don't know about you, but pre-washed greens are always a welcome time saver. So that's why I like to buy things like this that are ready to go. But otherwise, you can just simply take your salad greens, if they need to be washed, put them in a salad spinner, and then fill it with cold water. If you see any little yellow ones along the way, you can of course pick those out. Then use the lid of the salad spinner to just drain the water off. Then just give it a spin. Drain off the liquid. And voila, you've got beautiful, bright, clean greens. You can just go through them more easily now to pick out any little yellow ones and discard them. And you can use it right away. Or if you're not using it right away, you can place it in a plastic or glass container that's lined with a little paper towel to help absorb any extra water that might be on the greens. So your greens don't have to be perfectly dry. A tiny bit of water on them will help to keep them fresh, but the paper towel is essential because that will help to absorb any excess. These are ready to pop in the fridge for later. Now let's wash our head of cauliflower. We want to put this in our bowl of cold water, and I'm changing the water in between, by the way. The water gets kind of funky, so you just put fresh water for each vegetable. And we're just going to let that sit for a minute or two, again, to loosen some dirt that might be on the surface. Now with cauliflower, sometimes it gets these dark little gray spots that don't really come off with scrubbing. So in that case, you'll see little cut marks here where I just took my knife and just shaved that off. So if you see little brown spots like this, you can just literally take a knife or a vegetable peeler and trim those off. Now I'm going to take a sharp pointed knife like this and just carefully trim off the leaves. I'm cutting in such a way so that I'm not only trimming off the leaves, but I'm also getting out some of the core at the same time. You'll see what I mean in just a second. And if you feel more comfortable putting this on a cutting board rather than holding it to not cut yourself, that totally works. See that little core there? Now you can hang on to this and use it for soup stock rather than throw it away if you want to get some use out of it. Same thing with the leaves, you can hang on to those and save them for soup stock. You can even just literally pull these off. So with the parsley, we're going to wash that the same way we did the arugula, where we put some cold water in our salad spinner, then drain it off, and we'll give this a spin. With our sweet potatoes, we're just going to immerse those in the cold water along with our scallions. And with the scallions, you'll just want to watch for any outer leaves. Sometimes the outer pieces of the scallion can get a little funky. This looks pretty good, but normally if we'd find a bad one, I would just peel it right off like that. And then we'll want to go ahead and trim these little ends, the roots, but these are great for soup stock. So save these things in a little plastic bag and make some soup stock. Same thing with the tips. You'll want to just trim off any bad spots there. And with the sweet potatoes, you can just give them a gentle scrub and a rinse. And if you're not using them right away, just be sure to pat them dry because the moisture will make them spoil faster. Now, if you're not using the parsley right away, just like the arugula, you're going to want to wrap that in a paper towel and put that in a plastic container or a glass container to keep it nice and fresh. The same goes for the scallions. You'll want to just make sure they're dried off really well, and if not using them right away, store them in a paper towel inside of a plastic bag or other container. Now, if you're concerned environmentally about using so many paper towels, of course you can get the unbleached ones, or you could even just use a dish towel or something, a muslin towel. Or linen towel. We're going to submerge the berries in a little cold water, swish them around a bit, and then we're just going to pour them through a strainer. We want to make sure we get the berries nice and dry because the water will make them spoil faster. So we're just going to very gently dry them off in a towel. And you guessed it, put them on a paper towel to absorb the extra water if you're not using them right away. These would probably be best kept in the refrigerator in a shallow single layer rather than piled up like this, but we're going to be using them right away. But just know, if you are storing them, put them in a more wide, flat container. With spaghetti squash, I just use a damp towel to wipe the outside. You could run it under water and scrub it with a brush if you want, but we're not really eating the outside, so it doesn't even matter so much. But when we are cutting into it, if there was like dust or debris on the outside, we don't want that getting inside, so just give it a good wipe. Okay, so let's talk leeks. Don't be intimidated by this unusual vegetable. If you're not familiar with it, you will have to be careful in how you wash it because it does collect a lot of dirt on the inside of the leaves. Let me show you. So first you want to give it an initial soak in water just like the other vegetables. Then we're going to trim off the end. Then what I like to do is actually cut it in half so it's just not so long to deal with. So the top leaves will just naturally fall apart, and those are a little bit easier to get inside of. But with this one, we're going to want to carefully cut it, and you'll want to probably set it on a cutting board to cut it. And you're going to want to slice it right down the center. And see how I even cut like a certain direction? Like leeks are flatter, like they're kind of like flat. They're not perfectly round often. So you just cut through the center there with, you know, the flat side down to make it a little easier. And then you're going to see all that dirt inside. Look at that. So if you thought you had washed a leek and got all the dirt, not quite, my friend. Look at all that. So we're going to wash it again. We're going to put it back in the bowl of cold water. So now we're giving them the second rinse and just being sure to get inside all those leaves to rinse away all that dirt. You can rub them with your fingers or use the vegetable scrub brush just to make sure you've gotten all the dirt out of there. I should mention that you want to be sure that you really get this fully cut off, this bottom part. It holds the leaves together, and we want to remove that so that the leaves come apart more easily so that we can really make sure it's thoroughly clean. But again, this makes a great soup stock addition. To prepare our wakame, we're just going to cover it with some cold water and let it soak for about 10 minutes. So to make our kelp noodles nice and soft, we're going to add two things. I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of baking soda and the juice of half a lemon. And then you'll just want to mix it together with your hands. And you'll feel it starting to soften right away. And we're going to let the noodles sit for about 10 minutes or so until they're soft enough for you. And then you can give them a rinse. Some methods also call for adding warm water and using a little bit more baking soda, but I find that this method works nicely. After 10 minutes, you'll see that the wakame has reconstituted and absorbed a lot of the water. So now we're just going to rinse it off and drain it. You can even give it a good squeeze just to make sure you're getting all the water off. Not all the water, but most of the water. And then transfer it into a bowl. If you're not using this right away, it will keep in the refrigerator for a few days in a covered container. But it's such a nice time saver to have sea vegetables already reconstituted and washed and ready to go. Sea vegetables are such a great source of minerals and trace minerals that we just can't even get from land vegetables. If you find the flavor kind of fishy and oceany and you don't care for them, hold on and wait for the recipe I'm going to show you how to make, because they can really taste great if you prepare them the right way. Now all of our prepped ingredients are ready to go. You can either store some of these in the refrigerator for later use, or I'm going to show you how to make recipes out of them right away. But you can see that this is a big time saver to have everything prepped and ready at your fingertips. So remember our cauliflower leaves? I put the cauliflower leaves and a few other vegetable scraps like some little ends of celery and little squash peels. What else do I have in here? Sometimes I put like parsley stems. Here's the bottom of one of the leeks. So just a few random little vegetable scraps normally you'd throw away. I have these here in the pot. I'm going to add a little pinch of wakame, which is going to add nice nutrition and flavor, just like a tablespoon or so. And this is about 4 cups of vegetable scraps. I'm going to cover everything with water. I'm going to bring it up to a boil on the stove and then lower it to simmer for about, like 1 hour or even 45 minutes, and then strain it and we'll have a nice, nutritious vegetable broth. Now we're going to prepare our spaghetti squash, and cutting into this is the hardest part. So what I recommend doing is actually using a smaller, sharp knife to make the first initial cut. Okay, once you can get your knife out of there, now we can go in there and use a larger knife to do the rest of the cutting. If you're having trouble with the larger knife, just resort back to the smaller knife to really get in there. This is an exceptionally large spaghetti squash too, so it's a little trickier, but normally with a smaller squash, it's not quite so formidable. So now that we finally have it in half, we can go ahead and get a large spoon and scoop out all of this rind and seeds. I'm going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of olive oil to each half and just kind of brush that all over. Now I'm going to generously sprinkle each half with some sea salt, and you can add black pepper if you like, but I'm going to skip that. And then we're going to sprinkle each half generously with some onion powder. You can use some garlic powder too if you like. And now I'm going to place these in a preheated 400-degree oven for 40 to 50 minutes. And you'll want the cut side facing down. You can line your baking dish with parchment paper. You can bake these on a baking sheet. You can add a little splash of water. So there are different ways to do this, but I just lightly grease the bottom of this casserole. It releases its own moisture, so I'm just going to put it in the 400-degree oven for 40 to 50 minutes, just like this. So now you can see that after 10 minutes, our kelp noodles are nice and soft. This is very spaghetti-like, and yet we've kept the long strands. I find that with some other methods where you use hot water, if the water's too hot, it ends up breaking the noodles and it gets like vermicelli. So this is a really nice result, and we didn't have to cook a thing. So here's my spaghetti squash out of the oven, and you basically just take a fork and you should be able to easily pull the strands. And the great thing about spaghetti squash is it's so versatile. You can serve it any way that you would, like you would serve spaghetti. So you can just top it off with like a marinara sauce or any of your favorite pestos or sauces. So I'm going to use my leafy greens to make a leafy green stir fry. Over here I have some vegetable broth, so I'm going to add a little splash of that to do a broth saute, or you could use olive oil if you prefer. And I'm going to heat this up over kind of medium-high heat. I want to get that nice and hot. Then I'm going to add 2 sliced scallions, a little pinch of salt, and a couple cloves of garlic. And these are minced. Now you won't get the dramatic sizzle that you normally get when you heat oil in a pan. It's a little bit different to do like more of a water or broth saute. It's more of like kind of a quick steaming process, but we are stir frying it, moving it back and forth. And after cooking your scallions and garlic for a minute or two, you can add the sturdier greens. So I'm adding some collard greens here. I chopped up 1 whole bunch of collard greens, but you can add, other types of greens to this kind of stir fry. You can add another pinch of salt and another splash of broth. Now we're just going to keep that moving around. And I'm going to put a lid on that and let that cook by itself now for about a minute or 2 to help soften it before adding the other types of leafy greens. Now you'll want to watch this closely that it doesn't start to stick too much, and if it does, just add another splash of your broth. Let's see what's going on under there. Looks like we could use a little bit more liquid, so I am going to add 1 more splash. And then I'm going to add my broccoli. You guessed it, another pinch of salt. If you're on a sodium-free diet, you don't have to add the salt, but it does help to soften it. And I'm not adding a lot here, just enough to sort of help it to break down a little faster. Let that cook for another minute or two before we add the baby kale. All right, let's see what's going on here. We probably need another splash of broth. And this is the point where you'll want to add your nice tender baby greens because they really don't need to cook very long. Although they cook longer than something like spinach. Spinach is very delicate and doesn't cook long at all. You can use arugula, baby arugula like this, baby bok choy. Another little pinch of salt. And then we're going to add the rest of our vegetable broth. Cover it and let it cook for another minute or two and cook it just until the baby greens are tender enough. We do want to keep a close eye on it, just to make sure it's not sticking. I used about a 1/4 cup of vegetable broth, but you may need more. I think this is almost done, but we want to let that kale get really nice and tender. Oops, it is starting to stick, so you know what? We're probably going to have to add another splash. So maybe you want to plan on more like a 1/3 cup of vegetable broth, depending how high your heat is. I have my heat pretty high. Of course, you could add pepper, and if you like spice, you can add some, crushed red pepper flakes or something. I don't know, this is looking kind of done. I may not need to add the extra liquid after all, but just know that that's an option if you do need to, and that with broth or water sautés, you do need to keep a closer eye on it than with other types of sautés. All right, that is done. So to make a fruit compote out of some of our berries, I have roughly 1.5 cups of berries here. This is 1 cup of a mixture of diced apple and pear that's been cored and peeled. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of maple syrup and 1 pinch of salt. I'm going to bring this up to a boil over medium-high heat, cover it, and let it cook for about 15 to 20 minutes or until my apple and pear are nice and tender and the berries are soft as well. And while I'm waiting for that to heat up, I'm going to go ahead and mix up my arrowroot, which is a nice thickener. It's a little hard to see in here because of the light bowl, but it's a thickener a little like cornstarch. It's very powdery. We're going to mix up 1 tablespoon of the arrowroot with a couple tablespoons of cold water and just get that diluted separate from the fruit compote. And we won't add this in just yet. We're going to wait until this is cooked for maybe 5 to 10 minutes before adding this. So after 5 to 10 minutes, you should have nicely softened fruit, but it's still going to look kind of watery. So this is where we want to thicken it up. So just add the diluted arrowroot. And give it a good stir. And you'll see that it starts to thicken up pretty quickly. It gets that nice glazy, pie filling consistency. That's what we want. Perfection. And it's basically done. You can really just remove it from the heat at this point, or if you want to thicken it even a little more, just let it cook for another minute or so. But this is pretty much done. We're going to set it aside to cool. This makes a great topping for oatmeal. I even like it as a dessert on its own. To make our carrot beet marinara sauce, first we're going to place some carrots into a medium-sized saucepan. This is 8 carrots chopped. Next, we're going to add a cup of diced onion, 1 cup of celery, 2 tablespoons of chopped beets, 4 cups of vegetable broth, and this is the homemade one we made, by the way. We're using the cauliflower leaves with some other ingredients. And we're also going to add a teaspoon of dried basil and dried oregano, 1 teaspoon each. Now bring this up to a boil over medium-high heat. So after the vegetables and broth come to a boil, you're going to lower it to simmer on medium-low for 30 minutes covered. After 30 minutes has passed, go ahead and add your sea salt. I'm adding a half a teaspoon of sea salt, but you can add more if you like. And at this point, you can also feel free to add crushed red pepper flakes or black pepper or anything you like to add to your marinara sauce. Let this simmer for another 5 minutes covered. Now we're going to mix up our thickener. To 1/4 cup of arrowroot powder, I'm going to add 1/3 cup of water. And this is cold water. Instead of arrowroot powder, you can also use cornstarch. But if you're keeping this autoimmune protocol friendly, you'll want to use the arrowroot instead. Just stir it around and get that nice and diluted. So now we're going to add our immersion blender right into the mix to blend our sauce into a nice smooth consistency. Okay, this does take a while using the immersion blender, so if you get impatient, you can always blend it in a blender, but just be careful. I always let mine cool down before putting it in a blender, otherwise you might risk it, the heat making the lid pop off and then have a mess or get splattered with hot sauce. Now we're going to add our thickener, so we're going to turn the heat back on. I had turned the heat off while we were blending. I'm turning the heat back on to low, kind of a medium low, and I'm going to add my thickening mixture, maybe 1 tablespoon at a time. So every batch is a little different, you know, it depends on the size of your carrots and other things, so you may have enough thickener with just part of this mixture, or you may need all of it. It also depends how thick you like your sauce. So we'll just cook and stir this for a few minutes to see the texture. And we can also taste it at this time. Just be careful, it's really hot, don't burn your tongue. But you can taste it and see if you want to adjust it. Of course, if you wanted to add garlic powder, you could do that. I didn't add any garlic to this sauce, but we definitely could have cooked some garlic cloves into it if you want that traditional flavor. All right, this is thickening up nicely. Just going to add a little bit more of this mixture. So that really is kind of a nice pasta sauce consistency, and I don't know that we need all of that thickener, so I'm just going to leave it as it is, turn the heat off, and we're good to go. And if you missed any carrot chunks like this one, you can just go back in with your immersion blender and blend again. And if your mixture gets too thick and you want to thin it out, just add a little more vegetable broth. Now, just an option, you can add a little bit of fresh lemon juice, or if you're not following the autoimmune protocol diet and you can have vinegar, you could add a little splash of apple cider vinegar. But something a little tart will give you a closer flavor to real tomato sauce. So I'm just going to add maybe a teaspoon and see how that tastes, and you can always add more. And of course you can adjust other seasonings to taste if you want to add a little bit more herbs at this point, or if you want to add more salt. What else? Some people like to add olive oil. So this is your sauce. You can really just flavor it up however you like. So now we're going to make an arugula salad with beets and fennel. I have some beets that have been cooked here, and I'm just going to thinly slice them. These are some golden beets, and I also have some red beets. And these beets were boiled whole for about an hour, or just until they're fork tender, in water to cover. I'll put all of these detailed instructions in the recipe packet that you'll get in the PDF and link it below. If you prefer, you can also dice these beets rather than slicing them. And my recipe calls for 3 small to medium-sized beets, but really it's up to you. you know, how much you want to add, if you want to add more or less. So to make our arugula salad, we have 1 package of the pre-washed baby arugula. Then we're adding 1 cup of chopped radicchio. You can do a combination of radicchio and endive if you like. Then we're adding 1 cup of sliced fennel bulb, our beets, then we're going to top it off with 1 cup of chopped apple. And of course, feel free to change up any of these portions if you feel like it's, you know, too much apple or too much beet, whatever. You can really, you know, personalize this. Now we're going to make a dressing. We're going to make a couple different dressings, and you can choose whichever one you like. But I wouldn't add the dressing just until you're ready to serve this. The rest of the salad can be assembled like this, but you want to cover it with some plastic wrap and keep it undressed just until you want to serve it. And you can get creative. You can also add sliced oranges, you can add sliced almonds, you know, whatever additions you would like to this salad. So to create our cauliflower tabbouleh, we've got the cauliflower broken up into florets and placed into a food processor. Now I'm going to give it a few pulses to grind it up into a rice-like consistency. Just watch that you don't overdo it. You don't want cauliflower puree. This looks pretty good with the exception of 1 big piece that did not get ground up. So I can either remove everything that's been riced enough and then just do that by itself, or I might just give it 1 more pulse and see what happens. Oh, we still got that 1 big piece. So you know what? I'm just going to either chop it by hand or grate it by hand or something, but the rest is ready to go and we don't want to overdo it. And I'm going to add a little pinch of sea salt to help the leeks soften. After a minute or 2 of sauteing on their own, you can go ahead and add the garlic. This is 1½ cloves of chopped garlic. And cook and stir that for another minute or 2. If the leeks begin to brown too quickly, you can reduce the heat a little bit or add a tiny, tiny splash of water just to help them cool down a little bit. But not too much water, we don't want to get this soggy. That was literally like less than a teaspoon. It's probably like a 1/4 teaspoon or something. We're going to let them go another few minutes because we want to get the leeks nice and soft. We don't want them to have any strong oniony bite. All right, we got some nice browning going on the leeks. We don't want too much browning. It's time to add the cauliflower. We're just going to move this around for a couple of minutes or so. We don't want to overcook it. We want it to still have a little bit of texture. But we don't want it to be raw either. So just keep stirring this around and cooking it, tasting it along the way to see when you've reached your desired texture where it's tender enough but still has a little bite to it. And then we're going to add the scallions. This is 3 scallions sliced up. You can add more or less if you want to change it up a little. And then we're just going to stir that around. I think it's probably ready to remove from the heat. To make sure our cauliflower does not overcook by sitting in the pan, we're going to transfer it to a baking sheet lined with parchment paper and spread it out. This helps it to cool down faster and to stop cooking. The leeks and the garlic really help to give this nice flavor. Plus, we're going to be adding a delicious dressing and some other fun ingredients. To make our scallion dressing, I have 1/2 cup of olive oil. I'm adding 1/3 cup of lemon juice, 3 tablespoons of maple syrup, And this is a lot of scallions. It's a half cup of sliced scallions. You can add less if it's too scalliony for you. Now we're going to simply blend this up. So just blend that until it's nice and creamy, so about 30 seconds or so. And of course you can taste your dressing and adjust the flavor if you want it a little sweeter, or if you want, oh, you know what I forgot to add is the salt. I just remember myself, I'm going to adjust to taste, so I'm going to add a little bit of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt to this. And of course you can also add black pepper, cumin if you like, and other seasonings. Now let's put our tabbouleh salad together. So we've got the riced cauliflower along with the sauteed leeks and garlic that was in there. And then we have 3 peeled and diced cucumbers. These are the baby cucumbers. 1 cup diced cooked carrots. 1 cup of chopped parsley. And then just toss it all together. And this is where you can add your dressing. You probably don't want to add this whole amount. That might make it too wet, but I'd say at least half of it, and then you'll have extra to keep on hand. But really, it's up to you. You can just kind of taste it, see if you want to add a little bit more sea salt. Tiny bit more dressing. It's really up to you. So now we're going to make our Wakame cucumber orange salad. In this bowl I have 4 mini cucumbers that have been peeled and sliced. To this I'm going to add 1 cup of orange slices. I'm going to start out with just a 1/4 cup of our seaweed. This is the Wakame seaweed that we soaked and reconstituted in water and then drained. And then I did chop it up to get it a little bit more fine. But if you're new to sea vegetables, you can just go lightly. I mean, even if you just add like a tablespoon, it's fine, or a couple tablespoons. It's really up to you. It's just to give it a little nice mineral touch. Next, I'm adding 1/3 cup of sliced radishes, and this is a combination of red radishes and some watermelon radish. 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, about a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. I may not even add all of that. See how it tastes first. 3 tablespoons maple syrup. And this is the juice of 1 orange. And just gently stir this all together. And this is one of those salads that tastes better the longer it sits. I mean, not too long, but it's almost better like the next day, or at least within a few hours, so it has a chance to marinate. Last but not least is our berry vinaigrette. So here I'm going to add 1 cup of berries. And this could be blackberries or blueberries. In this case, I'm using all blueberries. I'm adding a 1/4 cup of olive oil. 1/4 cup of freshly squeezed orange juice. 1/3 cup of lemon juice. And you can always add a little bit less. If you're not so keen on a sour taste, add less. Add just a 1/4 cup and then see how you like it, and then you can add the rest if you want to. And then I have a 1/4 cup of maple syrup. 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. And we're just going to blend it up. So I've peeled all of my sweet potatoes. Now I'm going to cut them into 1/4 inch long strips. So first we're going to cut an outside piece. And then lay the flat side down. We can cut this into strips. Some of these might be a little thicker. It's hard to get them, perfectly uniform, but basically just want long, thin, French fry looking pieces. And then just repeat this with all the remaining sweet potato. Now I'm going to place the cut fries into a bowl of cold water, and I'm going to let these soak in here for at least 30 minutes, even up to overnight in the refrigerator. And you don't want to salt the water, just plain cold water. This will help to produce nice, crispy, baked fries. So after 30 minutes have passed, or even up to as long as overnight, you'll want to drain your sweet potato fries. And then we're just going to rinse these with some cold water. Now, using a clean towel, you're going to spread your fries out on the towel to dry them off. And you really want to make sure you get them nice and dry. Now, be sure to rinse and dry your bowl because we'll be using this to put the sweet potato fries in and add some seasoning. To the fries, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of oil. This could be either avocado oil or olive oil. Now, if you're doing oil-free, this recipe is not for you. And then you'd want to look into some air fryer recipes where you can make oil-free fries, but that is not this recipe. Now just toss until the fries are evenly coated with the oil. In a small bowl, mix together 2 teaspoons of arrowroot powder, or you can use cornstarch. But again, if you're keeping this autoimmune protocol friendly, you'll want to use the arrowroot. And then you're going to add your spice seasoning. Now I'm keeping it simple. I'm just using a teaspoon of onion powder. But if you want to, you could add garlic powder, smoked paprika, cracked black pepper. You could even add Old Bay seasoning if you like. And then just stir this together. And once that's all combined, you can toss that over the fries as well. And this is one more step that helps to make crispy baked French fries. Just toss the fries to evenly coat them with the arrowroot and the onion powder. And notice, we're still not adding the salt yet. If you add the salt too soon, it softens the fries, and we want these to be crispy. Now arrange your fries in a single layer, and hopefully we can get them all on one sheet, but if not, you'll just have to use 2 baking sheets and do them in 2 batches because you don't want to overcrowd the fries. You want them to be in a single layer and not overlapping. Meanwhile, we have our oven preheating to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so one sheet is covered. Looks like we will need another pan, so we're going to put these aside and grab another sheet and line it with parchment paper. I forgot to mention that this is lined with parchment paper. Place the fries in the oven for 15 minutes. So after 15 minutes, you're going to want to turn all of your French fries individually. I know this is tedious. I wish it could be avoided, but this will also ensure nice, crispy French fries, so it's well worth the effort. And I just want to mention here that I am baking my sheets of French fries separately. If you have a big enough oven, you can bake both sheets at the same time, but you might want to rotate which shelf they're on midway through the baking. So like after 8 minutes, switch shelves if you have them on different shelves. And then after we rotate each fry, we're going to bake these for another 10 to 15 minutes. And then we'll bake the other sheet of fries the exact same way. Now bake these for another 15 minutes. So once the fries are out of the oven, you're going to want to sprinkle them with however much sea salt you'd like and let them sit for another 5 minutes before serving them. If you're doing a low sodium diet, you don't want to add the salt, that's fine too. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make these recipes and that you got inspired to make them yourself. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I'm providing you with a PDF guide of this meal prep. It covers cook times and storage tips and includes links to any recipes that might be on my website, naturalkitchenschool.com. I think you'll find this really helpful in making meal prep easier. You can find the link to this guide in the description box below this video. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. When you subscribe and hit the notification bell, you'll find out about new cooking videos when they come out. Thanks for watching and see you soon.